Grin, Commissioner Engler,
Here.
Commissioner Francina, Commissioner Gorell,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Judge,
Here.
Commissioner Long, Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner McQueen-Lejeune, Commissioner Parvin,
Here.
Commissioner Tremblay, Commissioner White,
Here.
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Thank you.
We good? Okay. And is Commissioner Wyrick on audio?
Are we going to do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah, don't get ahead of me. We don't have anybody calling in, correct?
No, we don't have any, anybody calling in, any commissioners.
And Commissioner Long is yelling at me because I haven't done the Pledge of Allegiance yet, so
I didn't yell, I just asked politely.
I'll ask Commissioner Judge if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Sure. Please stand. Remove your hats. Repeat after me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Okay, at this time, we'll move to public comments on items not on the agenda. These are items that would be under the purview of this commission but are not agendized. So far, I have 3 speakers that have requested to speak. And Ms. Jolly, I understand that your husband's going to speak first, and then you're going to cede your time to him to allow him to read your letter. Is that correct? Perfect. So we will call Mr. Bob Jolly to the dais first, or to the podium first, I'm sorry.
Good morning. I'd like to refer to the letter, the handout that was given to you just a few moments ago. The purpose of this letter is to update you on the progress of Sierra Northern Railway's agreement from neighbors living in the Old Telegraph, Grand Avenue, Cliff Avenue, Oak Street neighborhood. This is a rural agricultural neighborhood that's been impacted by the sudden arrival of 84 heavily graffitied CMEX rail cars still parked along Old Telegraph Road in Fillmore. Some of them line our neighborhood entrance. Others of the garish and truly offensive rail cars are parked directly across from homes, blocking views of orchards and mountains. We're appreciative of Supervisor Long's efforts to set up a meeting on August 15th with Sierra Northern Railways, but felt it became a long overdue public relations event only, with much unrelated information about freight lines, of which we have none in the area, and several untruths being shared. As you can tell from the pictures enclosed, the rail property does not seem to be patrolled daily for trash, and large piles of unattractive dead brush are still piled up as our fire season begins. The highly offensive graffiti still remains, and you can refer to those pictures back there. There's even some choice F-bombs on the rail cars. You can see the piles of dried brush. You can see people playing on the rail cars. There's also a picture that I'll get to later, the truck that blasted through the barrier onto the tracks over near Halleck Road. The rail bikes had to stop so that truck didn't run them over. And anyway, those are the pictures that are referred to as I talk. The local office of Sierra Northern Railways on Santa Clara Street remains locked. It's not open for chats at all times, as was suggested. We do know that it's not true that the rail cars are only located in our neighborhood, because they were located there when the rail bridge collapsed. They were brought in afterwards. We do not believe the rail cars cannot be currently moved in small groups using the switchbacks in Santa Paula. They've been moved in small groups since. We accept the sympathy of Supervisor Long, but now we need action. It's been 8 months of letters and calls and public comment, and little has happened. Please understand our neighborhood was not pacified by the meeting in Fillmore. We feel our concerns have continued to be negated, whitewashed, and our request for information purposely delayed by the VCTC leadership and planning team. We are upset that our residents facing other life hardships now have the VCTC and Sierra Northern Railways added to their challenges. We feel that the Sierra Northern Railway VCTC agreement is shocking and very poorly scrutinized agreement, which had never been presented to the VCT Commission with a recommendation to sign. Those planning professionals with whom we've shared it feel it was obviously and craftily written by Sierra Northern Railway's legal team seeking to give Ventura County residents little protection and to maximize the railway's ability to do business as they please. We believe it to be an embarrassing and thoroughly unacceptable contract that cannot be and will not meet the changing needs of Ventura County over the next 35 years. The agreement gives the railway the ability to create unlimited railway storage on the railway tracks all along the Santa Clara Valley from Montalvo past Piru, with exceptions only for the cities of Santa Paula and Fillmore and the communities of Saticoy and Piru. Our neighborhood has 200 homes surrounded by these rail cars, which are now experiencing heavy tagging, not only on the rail cars themselves, but all over the surrounding areas. We have increased crime, students jumping around in the cars, trash, homeless encampments, a buildup of brush, and our once beautiful and pristine neighborhood, a major road into the town of Fillmore, now looks like a ghetto. We question why the industrial storage along the tracks in our restrictive agricultural exclusive zone is not a zoning violation. We read the updated Ventura County General Plan and find no mention of railcar storage crossing a major portion of Ventura County. There's also the SOAR agreement, which voters passed twice, which demands a public vote of the people in order to change. And another part of the enclosure, there's a resource management agency letter. This was a letter to a neighbor of ours. It's quite an old, 1991. This person was parking a dump truck in the AE zone, and he was getting hammered for it. You can read this letter. It goes on and on about these prohibitions and so, and you better do. A dump truck in the AE zone raised this much concern, but we can have 85 rail cars plastered with graffiti and nothing happens. It just seems like the AE zone is there for a reason, and we need to uphold our own county rules and regulations. Next page. We've approached several enforcement agencies such as planning, the Resource Management District, Ventura County Code Enforcement, and the sheriff. It's become obvious to us that with words to one lower staff person, he's told us it's kind of an unwritten policy for Ventura County enforcement agencies to police other Ventura County agencies. And so the department heads we talked to at the county center referred us back to the VCTC, which, as usual, did not return our emails. The VCTC Sierra Northern Railway Agreement also gives Sierra Northern unlimited right to close State Highway 126, both directions, at two different places on a heavily trafficked Highway 126. These delays cause our first responders, police, fire, and ambulances to face life-threatening security and property damage delays. And you can see from the picture there's already been a case where a truck blasted through the gates and threatened the rail bikes. And we see that the rail bike riders, had a first car not stopped at the rail arms, the small rail bikes would have been progressing down the highway facing serious injury if not death, allowing the sunburst rail car tourists to cross a heavily truck-laden Highway 26 is another example of faulty planning. This is our main access road and our only state highway. Stopping trucks unnecessarily and restarting them also increases air pollution. We've heard reports but cannot confirm at this time that the traffic information given to the Federal Railroad Administration for the security clearance is based on 1989 information. If so, it does not, I repeat, does not reflect the current traffic flow, much less the projected traffic 35 years from now. So, since I'm running low on time, I'm going to try to summarize this. Today we have 4 requests. We ask that the rail cars in our neighborhood be moved to a less public place, as painting them will only result in further graffiti after a certain length of time. They could still be moved to the west of their current location between Fillmore and Santa Paula and be out of the public view. Number 2, we also ask that the Sunburst rail bikes be located to begin the rail car route to begin in Santa Paula and proceed to the west through flower fields and past the old Faulkner Farm of the Burpee Seed Company. This is just as scenic as the current route east, and proceeding west will mean that the rail bikes will not cross a fast-moving congested highway, but rather city streets in Santa Paula and fairly deserted farm roads where the traffic moves far more slowly. We ask, number 3, that these options be presented by Supervisor Long in person to Sierra Northern Railway as reasonable accommodations at the VCTC schedule a response from Sierra Northern as a major agenda item at the October VCTC meeting so that all the commissioners, the CHP, local city managers, and the public can discuss the situation and finally come up with a path of resolution. Finally, if accommodations cannot be reached with the Sierra Northern Railway, we ask that the termination of contract language at the end of the VCTC Sierra Northern agreement be reviewed by Ventura County Council and the process of termination with a non-cooperative Sierra Northern Railway begin. Many of our residents are applying to have their new property assessments lowered instead of the raises in value that were sent out. They're working with realtors to validate property losses and home sales. We're also in current contact with new newspapers willing to share our concerns and are opening contacts with the California Public Utilities Commission and our state and federal officials to see if they can better assist us with our concerns. We realize that the Sierra Northern Railway can be an asset to our county and the city of Santa Paula and Fillmore, but only if they're open to providing a safe experience for tourists and becoming better neighbors. At this point, the railway is making a lot of money and VCTC is earning a nice share of the money. But this is at the expense of tax-paying residents and hardworking farmers of our area. Possible future harm to the whole county in terms of highway safety and stored rail cars would be worth an early termination before more damage is caused. In closing, we tell our children and students that everyone makes mistakes. We believe that Supervisor Long and the VCTC Commission probably had the best interest of the supervisory district and Fillmore in mind when you voted and signed the agreement. But it's been obvious that this is cruel, and an apology is not enough. The perception is that our officials are selling us out to fund projects in other wealthier areas of the county. At the VCTC, and our officials will just continue to drag their feet until we're silenced. This has been an incredibly disrespectful and demeaning action to have happened, and to allow it to continue makes it more insulting. Thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to hearing from you, but to be honest, it hasn't happened yet. You may contact Amy Garola anytime. I know that our officials in VCTC have many emails from her, and I know she's sorry not to be able to be here today. Respectfully, the neighbors of Old Telegraph, Cliff Avenue, Grand Avenue, Oak Avenue, 7th Avenue, Sycamore Road, and adjacent side streets in Fillmore. And once again, there's illustrations to show the beautiful scenic backdrop that these rail cars kind of impair. That mountain, just behind that mountain, by the way, is the Hopper Mountain National Wildlife Refuge. We've got the...
Mr. Jolly,
Okay,
I apologize, but we've gone over the allotted time for both you and your wife. But
you don't have to apologize. Thanks for listening.
And we do have handouts that have been given to all of the commission, and I believe there are extra handouts if anyone in the audience would like to have one. So please see our clerk, and she will provide what she has to you. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a third speaker, and I'm not sure if you want to speak on, right now, Tracy Stewart. Do you want to speak on items not on the agenda, or do you want to speak on the budget item?
I want to just speak about the Santa Paula branch line.
Okay, yeah, we have an agendized item for it, but if you want to talk about the same thing that the Jollies were talking about, now would be the time to talk.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on that a little bit. if I could.
Quite all right.
Yeah, I promise I won't speak as long.
No, you're good.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to give you a brief recap. Good morning, everyone, of the informational meeting that we had back on August 15th by VCTC, Sierra Northern, and Mendocino Rails. Sierra Northern and Mendocino Rails gave a brief overview of their operations for both companies. They rallied hard to convince us locals that they're helping us by coming to town, helping VCTC perhaps, but our local community not so much. Their operational outlook and community outreach did little to change my perception of them. I feel like it was about 7 months too late. Some of the highlights that weren't discussed at that meeting were our declining property values since the railcar storage has moved into our neighborhood, as well as when Mr. Beard, CEO of Sierra Northern, was asked about the railcar storage contract ending in February of 2024, he could not answer that question. As well as he could not answer the question as to whether or not the railcar storage would cease to exist beyond this contract. So we're still waiting for answers on that. Mr. Beard told me directly after the meeting that he would move the rail cars if he could. The reason he cannot move them at this time is due to having only one locomotive on our side of the river. That, folks, is what we have been waiting to hear for the last 7 months. That is the biggest takeaway from that meeting for me, and that was not publicly addressed. That was private between Mr. Beard and myself, one-on-one. So how can VCTC get him the locomotive power he needs to end this railcar storage once and for all? It's now time for your leadership to step up and help Sierra Northern. We all need your help in this. And if we get those rail cars moved, can there be an addendum or an amendment to the contract that states no rail car storage in the unincorporated area west of Fillmore, known as the Sespe Creek area? Enough of the finger pointing, passing the blame. We know what needs to happen to solve this problem. Let's work together to move these rail cars. Thank you.
Thank you, and because these are comments on items not on the agenda, we're not able to engage in any discussion at this point, but we will ask staff to follow up with all the speakers.
One more question. Can I ask that this be added to the agenda for October? I know I spoke with Commissioner Brogy, and she said she was going to see that it was added for this month, but I don't believe that it had been. So, and she's not here today to confirm that. So I would really appreciate if we could have it on next month.
Ms. Harrison, can we make that happen?
Chair McDonald, we have a standing item. It's on the consent agenda this month, but we have a standing item of update on the Santa Paula branch line, so we certainly could, make that a formal item next month. And
Okay. Commissioner Long?
Thank you. Thank you. What I was going to ask is that 8J, HK, and HL pull from the consent so that we can discuss that. On 8L is actually the monthly update for July and August. So if we could do that, we can have a little bit more dialogue on it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 5, our Caltrans report. Commissioner Roberts.
Thank you very much, Chair McDonald, Commissioners, and Director Erickson. It's great to be back here again after summer. It was actually in July of 2023, this past summer, that Caltrans celebrated its golden anniversary. So a little bit of history, that it was in 1973 that the California Department of Transportation was formed and signed into law by then Governor Ronald Reagan to unify all transportation functions under a single department. So in our 50 years as an organization, we certainly achieved a lot in building and maintaining the state highway system. And as your district director for Ventura County, I'm looking forward to the continued partnership and collaboration in how we can best serve you, the travelers, and the communities here in Ventura. So I am very much looking forward to what lies ahead. And just wanted to report a little bit on the emergency work that we have on Route 33. We're continuing repairs. We're looking at a completion date of late November, early December. And so we're continued repairs on the washed out roadway. That's nearing completion. We're doing slope reconstruction with horizontal sandbags for erosion control. That's underway. And then the last bit of work that we have is constructing 5 retaining walls with steel piles to be constructed and just kind of hold up the highway. Workers are also gathering seeds and replanting native vegetation to help with erosion control along the damaged slopes. Most of the damaged guardrail along the highway has been replaced, and then we're still continuing just additional work that will involve some relocation of utilities and slope reconstruction. So we have a 1-minute video that kind of shows the work that's been done, and it's looking very beautiful. So I want to take this opportunity to just say that with all of the technology that we have, a lot of the work that is done is still done by people. And so I do appreciate all of the Caltrans workers, but also our emergency responders and just everybody for slowing down and taking care of our highway workers and contractors who are working, day and night to keep our roads safe and clear. And so I really thank all of you for this opportunity for the update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Commissioner Roberts? Commissioner White?
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, you talk about vegetation growth. There's a huge amount of vegetation growth going up past Emma Woods Park, going up towards Carpinteria, and it looks like it's going to be taken care of. It's a real safety safety problem with bicyclists because the growth goes into the bicycle lanes, so bicyclists have to go into the road, and in the road there are cars, and we don't like to meet with cars over there at all. And it's amazing how much growth has happened just in the last month or so. So I really appreciate what Caltrans is doing and for the safety of bicyclists, because it's a major road going up, bicyclists going up to Carpinteria and Santa Barbara area. So thank you again.
Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Engler.
Are we working? Good, very good. Thank you for what you're doing up at Thousand Oaks. I know you're getting to some of the weed abatement and some of the off-ramps. It's late in the season, though, for doing the weed abatement. Can the schedule be moved up on some of these locations to help us with weed abatement at off-ramps and along the sides of the roads? Because the 101 is, in fact, a barrier for fire spread. So the more we can keep that as a barrier, the better.
Absolutely. We have a very robust vegetation management plan. So it's not just the weed abatement starts even before the weeds come in. It's, we apply growth retardant for weeds early on this season. So we can definitely look at moving that up. And as we had the unusual rain that we did just this summer, that just kind of sprouts and kind of unexpectedly the growth. So we are working very hard to really work on just doing the clearance. So I appreciate that comment, and we'll take care of it.
Okay. Any other comments for Commissioner Roberts? No? And Commissioner, I understand you have another obligation this morning that you'll have to leave a little bit early, but thank you very much for joining us. Okay, this takes us to item number 6. Commissioner Executive Director reports, and this is the time where the Executive Director or Commissioners can provide information on any activities they've undertaken in support of their commissionership here on VCTC. And we'll start out with Mr. Erickson.
Chair McDonald, I'd actually deferred if other commissioners have reports first, but it's your.
Sure. Do any commissioners have any reports they'd like to present?
Thank you. I really wanted to say thank you to our staff. We are going to be discussing the Santa Paula branch line a little bit further in the consent, so thank you for letting me pull those 3. But I do want to say thank you also to the Department of Agriculture, Farm Bureau, CoLab, our farmers, our residents, really for coming together to try to make solutions out of the working relationship with Sierra Northern. Just want to first just say thank you. We have a lot to still work on, but I want to make sure that we all remember we're working together on this, and just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner reports? Hey, Mr. Erickson, you ready now?
I am ready. Thank you, Chair McDonald. Commissioners, welcome back after the 1-month break from our meeting. Happy September to all of you. You have an executive director's report in front of you with several items. We really have many things going on. I will try to keep my report not too long, but I did just want to, again, acknowledge my team for the work they are doing on many issues and our partnerships. As you recall from our strategic plan that we adopted back in April, VCTC is fundamentally about partnerships. Our partnership with Caltrans, with the Port of Hueneme, which is presenting today, with all the cities, with the county, and with Gold Coast Transit. And just quickly, thank you, Commissioner Long, for your comments. We are obviously engaged in many discussions right now with Sierra Northern on several issues. We'll certainly be talking more about that, but we are hopeful to move forward in a solution-based advocacy on this, and I know we'll be discussing that more with the items that have been pulled on Sierra Northern. And next item, but I did want to cover a few items. Next slide from the Executive Director's report. Happy to report that we are extending our both college ride and youth ride free programs, and this is something, as the former transit director, I'm very, very proud of. And as I've said before, it exemplifies, I think, the spirit of cooperation among all of Ventura County's transit operators, that we were able to take this state funding, this LC top funding, and instead of each community just using it for an individual project, we combined it all, which allowed us to do the college ride program, where every college student in Ventura County rides free on our buses, and that actually includes Santa Barbara City College and students that go to UCSB who live in Ventura County, and then more recently, of course, the Youth Ride Free program. So those are both programs that have led to an increase in ridership as we still struggle with, like everyone else, to regain ridership that was lost during the pandemic. But they are great programs. I just took the bus the other day on my bike and talked to a young woman who was actually riding the Metrolink from Montalvo to Camarillo because she was going to CSUCI and then taking our bus back to her home in Montalvo. And I was just very impressed by her her diligence, and hopefully a sign that we'll have more and more youth riding our buses. Next slide. September, as noted in my report, is Rail Safety Month, and we have a couple brief videos from Operation Lifesaver. As you know, we partner very closely with Metrolink, with LoSan, with Union Pacific, with Sierra Northern, with all our rail operators to ensure that we do everything we can to promote safety. So there are two quick videos, one's in English and one's in Spanish, and if we can show those right now.
Trains are everywhere. You should always expect one, even on private property. Only cross tracks at designated crossings that fit your equipment. If you don't fit, don't commit. Look, listen, live.
Los trenes están por todas partes. Siempre debes esperar uno, incluso en una propiedad privada. Cruza las vías solo en los cruces designados que se ajusten a tu equipo. Si no cabes, no te arriesgues. Mira, escucha, vive.
Thank you, Steve. Next slide. We also wanted to highlight an e-bike safety training program that is part of the California Highway Patrol. And I have a little write-up in there, but I think this is important. I know this has come up before in cities and in general. E-bikes are kind of new animals, so to speak, on our roads. They offer a lot of utility and they offer a lot of opportunities to bring people into biking who might not otherwise do it, but they also present some safety challenges. They tend to have much higher speeds and way more. So hopefully we'll be sharing these resources with all the cities and again, continuing to promote them with our partners. Next slide.
Are you sharing those on our website?
Pardon?
Is this information shared on our website?
We will be sharing on our website also. Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And as Chair McDonald has noted, and we talked briefly about, although it hadn't happened yet, at our July meeting, the X Games was a great success, and many of the commissioners were involved in that. Commissioner White served on the board that helped bring that about. Commissioner Johnson, City of Ventura. Really, everyone had a part in playing that, and I think Commissioner Engler mentioned to me afterwards, he said, if we could get transit to operate this seamlessly all the time, we'd probably get a lot more people on it. But I think especially after some of the challenges from the Strawberry Festival and traffic congestion, everyone coming together, the coordination of the rail, the bus transit, our Freeway Service Patrol added additional beats, and it, I think, really couldn't have gone any better. So it's a great kind of template for future events, hopefully future X Games here, but really, I think, testament again to partnerships and working with all the transit operators and the local governments as well. Next slide. And saving kind of well, this won't be quite the last, but we have reached a milestone. VCTC celebrates its 35-year anniversary this month. Back in September of 1988. Anyone remembers what they were doing in September of 1988? I was a sophomore at UCSB, but VCTC we're celebrating 35 years, and we'll be having some periodic kind of reminders and updates as we go along. I want to acknowledge Darren Peshka, my manager of government community relations. We have some, we'll be doing some reminders about everything VCTC does as part of our regular outreach and promotions. But it is pretty exciting. Is that the last slide, Steve? So finally, just wanted to note, for those of you especially who serve on the Gold Coast Board, the state of California, fortunately, has now released a significant amount of money to help transit, and it's in the form of SB 125. So I have some information there about that funding, which will flow through VCTC, and will be coming back to you over the next few months, certainly a couple times before December when we make a decision, but we'll be meeting in our Transcom committee, our committee of all the transit operators, working with Gold Coast, Simi Valley Transit, all the operators, to ensure that we are able to distribute this money in a way that meets the state's. There's quite a few hoops to go through with this. They're not just saying, here's more money for transit, use it as you please, which would be nice, but it rarely happens that way. But it is certainly an opportunity, and looking at really over a 2 or 3 year period, it's going to be in the neighborhood of $80 million extra dollars, which are badly needed, especially by our largest transit provider, Gold Coast, but as well as others too. So looking forward to reporting back to you about that, and again working with the other agencies on that. So that kind of an abbreviated report of what I have before you, but I'm happy to answer any questions right now.
Thank you. Director Johnson.
Thank you. Maybe not so much questions, but thank you, Mr. Erickson, for a number of things. And my fellow commissioners as well, you know, serving on Gold Coast. It's remarkable that our ridership has bounced back to the level that it has. You know, I've spoken with people associated with other transit agencies, and not many have seen the sort of rebound we have, and so much of that has to do with the Youth Ride Free program and the College Students Ride Free program. I wanted to also just make sure when we talk about the X Games that we thank Visit Ventura as well in downtown Ventura. You know, it's a different model of providing transportation than we've seen. It required some people to try some new things, and you know, I just echo what you say about hopefully we can bring it back again. Certainly at the City of Ventura, if it had gone badly, it would have made us less eager to have it return. It would have made the X Games less eager to return. And then finally, you know, just as you mentioned with the I think it's the TIRC funding, the SB 125, just so that everybody understands that even at Gold Coast, you know, we met earlier this week, and you know, we're looking at what would be an operating deficit growing over the next few years. And as I hinted at, for Gold Coast, it's not as bad as it is for other transit agencies. Some of the big transit agencies are really facing a funding cliff. But this money is a bridge that will only get us to the next model of delivering service. And so we look forward to working with the county, especially with the TIE study, the Transit Integration Efficiency Study, to make sure that Gold Coast and the rest of the county can look at a model moving forward, especially to meet all the increased demand that should be coming following all the state encouragement for adding new housing. But so thank you to my commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Erickson, for touching on those things and bringing all the good news today.
Thank you. Any other comments from Ms. Erickson? Commissioner White.
Thank you very much. Just to continue with that little speech that we just heard there from our city council member from Ventura, it takes a village, and the X Games was successful because it took a village. And I want to thank the staff, you know, particularly Darren, Peschke, and Claire Gradsky. You don't have to stand up. That it's important to realize we can't do it by ourselves. No one organization can do it by ourselves. Whether it's the Transportation Commission, whether it's the Visitors Bureau, who spent 3.5 years trying to put this thing together, whether it's the City of Ventura. And I just want to thank the staff, particularly the two that I just talked about, came to our meetings, had information about what needed to be done, calmed the police department a little bit on our transportation problems that they think they might have because of the Strawberry Festival. And again, all the work that the staff does from month to month, and I know we're going to consent pretty soon a lot of information that they do and that they work on, that we need to just thank them again. So thank you very much.
Any other comments from Mr. Erickson? No? Okay, seeing none, that will take us to item 7, additions or revisions to the agenda.
Chair McDonald, we do have some additions and revisions. I ask that the Commission would remove item 8I to a future meeting. That is the memorandum of understanding between VCTC and Metrolink regarding the Simi Valley Double Track project. We just have to we need to have Metrolink approve something before we do. So we'll be bringing that back at a future meeting.
Okay, so we're going to take it out completely?
We're just going to
then?
remove it to a future meeting.
Okay.
Correct. And then I believe Commissioner Long has already asked that the Santa Paula branch line items.
I believe she wants 8J and 8K pulled for discussion, correct? JK and L?
JK and L.
So, and just for 8K, we were going to need to pull that anyway because we need to make some modifications to that item, to the staff report in a couple places. So that will be done as they're pulled. But those are the only changes we have to the agenda.
Okay, so the direction then will be to pull 8J, K, and L for separate discussion. That will leave us the
I have an
remainder of, I'm sorry, Commissioner Parvin.
I just have a question on 8D. Is this on? Yeah. On 8D. It's a quick question.
Sure, well, Peter DeHaan is here, and hopefully he or I will be able to answer it.
Good morning.
I just was curious as to how much funding there is in the 101 project funding, because we're going to be loaning out money. So I'm just curious, what is the current amount that's in the fund?
Okay, so I don't have an answer like the numbers this. The 101 project, the scope that has been worked on for several years, there was an estimate where there's a new estimate being prepared. The old estimate from like 10 years ago was something like $800 million. It's something we know the existing funds are not adequate for. And so one of the items that is on the to-do list is to prepare an early action plan, is to sort of to look at the funds we have available and what would be the best project, sort of a first phase to do with the funds that are available, which looks like several $100 million. So that's the amount of money, and that comes from the STP funds. That's the money that looks like would build up by the time this project is ready to go to construction, which is around the end of the decade. So this loan, of course, is just the money gets paid back in the new federal fiscal year, which starts next month. So this is just, this doesn't really affect that at all. This is just, because the money gets paid back, it just helps California to get more money from the feds because of, to show how much money is being used. It gets the money where it can be used so that more money is being used in California during the fiscal year.
No,
So,
I get it.
helps
I
us
just was
indirectly.
curious about the amount that there's currently in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that takes us back to the info consent. 8I is pulled completely. 8J, K, and L are being pulled for discussion. That leaves us the remainder of info consent for action.
I would move the consent calendar except for items 8I, J, K, and L.
We have a motion by Vice Chair and a second by Commissioner Engler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. And then Commissioner Long, 8J.
Director Erickson, or Amanda, who would address this?
Which item did you want to take first?
We can do J.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Long, item 8J is an administrative budget amendment to the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget as a result of the damage to the Sespe Bridge and other storm damage in January, as well as the various issues that came up after the fact. Staff needed to spend more time managing and overseeing the Santa Paula branch line than we had anticipated. When we created the budget for the past fiscal year, we were expecting to see a reduced level of staff oversight and management time commitment, and so we had an insufficient amount budgeted for salaries, benefits, and indirect costs in the Santa Paula branch line budget. So we're asking for funding to be moved from the consultant services category, where we have sufficient resources, to the salaries, benefits, and indirect cost categories. And while there was sufficient funding available in the overall budget, we simply needed to have commission approval for the to authorize movement from one fund to the other. So from the Santa Paula branch line fund to the general fund, where salaries, benefits, and indirect costs are are maintained and financed. So this is a simple budget. We're asking for the budget authority to move that funding from the last fiscal year. So that doesn't affect the current fiscal year budget. It's an administrative cleanup item.
Thank you, and I wanted to say, I really appreciate, we did have a community meeting in Fillmore with 100 people, so I want to let you know that, and just the time and effort to put that out was a community meeting, so appreciate that. And we also had on August 26th, a growers meeting with the Farm Bureau. There's a lot more conversations going on. Wanted to know if this is enough budget or if there is more, because there are delays on the bridge that is being repaired. And now hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later, but I wanted to ask if there's more. Is this going to have to come back to us, or is this the only time?
So this particular item is for the fiscal year 2022-2023 that ended on June 30th, 2023. So this was for the past year. And when we do our end of year closeouts, we, of course, do look at vacation time and all of the things that are sort of the end of year cleanup from a finance perspective. And so that's where we discovered that we needed to correct the authority. So the answer to your question is no, we don't anticipate that that this budget amendment would need to be changed again. This was our cleanup. For the fiscal year coming ahead, we may need to increase the budget. I will say we are chewing through the approved budget probably much faster than we would have anticipated. For example, my time dedicated to Santa Paula branch line should be around 20% based on how we allocate our time across my 4 program areas, but it certainly is taking quite a bit more than that. So for the fiscal year 2023, 2024, we may need to amend the budget at a later time, but that's still to be determined.
Thank you, and I wanted to make sure our commissioners knew how much time you're spending on this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this
Sure.
item? Okay.
On item 8J?
I don't think there is. If we can move to 8K.
So for item 8K, this is a revised item that you originally saw in April of this year. We have been working with Sierra Northern Railway and with our council and with other partners from other rail agencies and doing quite a bit of research to try to benchmark the process for addressing rights of entry permits to access the Santa Paula branch line property and right-of-way. So I'd first like to distinguish between the leases, license, and utility licenses, leases and licenses that VCTC issues for long-term use of the branch line property. We have many of those on the order of 600, about over 100 active leases and licenses that we maintain and manage on a regular basis. And VCTC, through our agreement with Sierra Northern, retained the rights to continue to be responsible for and manage leases and licenses. This, on the other hand, is looking at rights of entry, which are for temporary access to the branch line in a much more defined and short-term basis. So even if you have a lease or a license to VCTC property, in order to actually access and step foot on the property for things like maintenance of a utility line, you're supposed to get a right of entry permit also from VCTC. And so in the past, VCTC managed and administered rights of entry permits. And originally, when we brought this to the commission, we sort of looked at a hybrid process where VCTC and Sierra Northern would work together and both sign off on the right of entry. However, after we had some questions during April regarding the fee structure, we went back to the drawing board and had a conversation initially with our colleagues at Metrolink about how they process rights of entry. And they were surprised that we would want to be part of that process at all, because rights of entry are very much a railroad operational requirement and process. So the real purpose of a right of entry permit is to ensure the safety of the rail line and railroad operations, and the safety of any users of the right of way. So this process that we've come to now proposes to have Sierra Northern be responsible for administering and preparing rights of entry permits. And I can tell you from a workload perspective, rights of entry are a gigantic, I can't find the right word for it, but we spend a lot of time chasing checks, making sure the certificates of insurance are received, looking at proposed changes to the rights of entry templates. It is extremely time-consuming, and I don't believe that the amount of work that goes and time that goes into them is equal to the amount of the benefit that VCTC or Sierra Northern or the public receive from a VCTC-led process regarding rights of entry. So that's sort of why we're coming to you with this item and why it's important to us as a staff. Because we really believe that this workload should be placed where it belongs as a railroad operational item. We did, however, retain in this proposed process VCTC's ability to review and ensure that all of the pieces are in place before Sierra Northern issues a right of entry permit. And it also allows us to track how many rights of entry are being issued and sort of how that process is working through Sierra Northern-led process. So I will kind of leave you with that background. I'm sure that some of you have questions that either I or Mr. Mattis will try to answer.
And just to add quickly, we do need to modify
Thank you.
as part of this process the item itself. There's some language, but we can wait to see what questions come up first before we do that.
First of all, appreciate this. This has been asked for by our farmers who are trying to get to their property. And for tens and tens of years, they've been getting through to their property with no fee, no problem, no K-rails blocking their entry for whatever reason. It may be that we should have done a right of entry with VCTC a long time ago, but today we stand for where farmers can't get to their property and we're having to deal with easements. And my concern is they go there every single day. So we're now going to charge them additional 10,000 fee? Is
So
that the
that's-
question? I was
no.
confused on that. and I
Sure,
wanted to make sure.
that's a different process. So someone who requires regular access to VCTC right-of-way property will still need to have a lease or a license in place with VCTC, whether that's a crossing agreement to actually cross the rail line, whether it's an access easement for driving up and down the right-of-way property to access adjacent properties, or whether that's cultivation or any of the other variety of uses that are maintained on the right-of-way. So that process is still retained by VCTC, and we will continue to manage and administer that. We're currently working with a number of growers on the Santa Paula branch line to put in place leases and licenses. So this would be for things like when a telecommunications company that has a pole on our property where they're leasing the property, they need to access it for whatever maintenance or sort of interim, shorter term projects. We sometimes will get right of entry requests for events, like the Fillmore High School Alumni Association received a right of entry earlier this year for their event where they have the event on both sides of the rail line at Fillmore City Hall. So for things like that, we would be processing rights of entry permits, or Sierra Northern would be processing a right of entry permit, but they don't require a long-term access to the property. So this, what we've proposed here is a 60-day limit. Anything over 60 days would go through the regular lease and license process.
Okay, and so before we would do this and there was no fee, and now there is a fee, or is?
Right of entry permits have always had a $1,000 processing fee, which I can tell you was probably not enough for most of them.
Okay, and you can understand my concern. I have farmers that are still trying to get access to their property, and we're in the process of
And we are
getting
working
these
with
right of
them.
entries.
We are working with the farmers that have requested access. I can think of two in particular that we're working with actively on a lease to the property that would give them regular long-term access to the property through a lease. And that's separate and apart from a right of entry permit that we are looking at here today.
Okay, but they can't use that until we get this agreement together?
No. So rights of entry are separate and apart from the leases and licenses that we're processing.
But the leases and licenses, they're still waiting to get access, or can they have access today, even though we're working on it?
Anyone who doesn't have current permission to enter the property, it would technically be trespassing. And so that like I said, we're actively working with two growers to fix that problem, and I would say that we're progressing, as quickly as they. We did have to wait a little while on a quote for aggregate, so that one got delayed just a little bit. But for the most part, those are proceeding quickly, and that is separate and apart from the right of entry process that we're asking you to look at today.
And similar to locks on gates that they can't get access through because it's the Sierra Northern is now in charge of those gates.
That was an interest technically of trespass, where the grower that was accessing the property did not have permission to legally be on the property. And in California, as I understand from our general counsel, railroads and public land, and they're not treated as a highway or a roadway. It's not generally public. It's treated as private property. And so without those legal instruments in place, they don't have permission. And so we are working with the grower in question with the locks to get it. And actually, I don't know. We wrote to them right after the meeting last week, and I don't believe we've heard back yet. I could be wrong on that because my staff is handling that one. But we've been responding when requested.
And I bring this up for our commission to understand the frustrations that our farmers are having, because this is a change from how VCTC was managing it to now Sierra Northern. Whether right or wrong, I'm just making sure you understand that those are some of the frustrations out there. And I appreciate, Amanda, that you're working on it, but it's still a frustration when you're farming every day and trying to get through things. And I just need people to understand what is going on with that. So thank you.
Being a person that's fairly fond of food, I would hope that we can do as much as possible to make this the least onerous process, as, yet still protect our interests, Sierra Northern's interests, and the farmers' interest. Mr. Mattis, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I was just going to add to Amanda's comments that, there's a concept that a lot of people are familiar with, adverse possession, or the ability to keep doing something you've done before. That doesn't apply to public property or to railroad property. So even if you've done it for 20 years without a right, that doesn't confer a legal right for you to continue to do it. So the best way to address the issue that the agricultural interests are actually experiencing right now is really to get them into a license agreement or a lease agreement, so they have the right to cross the right-of-way, so that we can get the practice memorialized, so that everybody's appropriately protected and they still have the access rights that they do, presuming that they don't interfere with the railroad operations, if you will, which, historically they've coexisted. And so there is a way to be able to memorialize their right to do something, and that would be, as Amanda said, that would be through like a lease or a license agreement, not these short-term right of entry agreements.
And so I would urge us to do that as quickly as we can, and I do have concerns on what the fee to do that is, because there was no fee before.
So leases and licenses have always carried a fee and will continue to do so. It's not the daily rates that you're seeing here in a right of entry. The rate that have the past several agreements that we've worked out with adjacent has been on the order of $1,600 per year per acre. So that's actually on the low side of the going rate for ag land in Ventura County. I have confirmed that through national, state, and local sources, including the Ag Commissioner's Office. So I believe we are charging a fair rate on the access leases. That is different from what we're asking here with respect to the right of entry because of the interruption of rail operations that go along with rights of entry, particularly when a temporary crossing is in place, for example. The railroad operations can't continue in that area, so it limits the ability of the railroad to operate. It also, in compliance with federal regulations, requires staff to be on hand to maintain operations, flagmen. It requires reviews of active rail activity within the corridor. It requires, radio men to hold the traffic and a whole host of other things. And so that's why there's a daily rate associated with that. That is a change in structure compared to what we have done in the past. But again, I believe in the past we were undercharging for the impact not only to staff time, but also to rail operations.
And those of us that sit on other rail committees will tell you that passenger strikes are one of our biggest concerns on all different lines. And sadly, in Somas last week, I believe there was a strike of a farm employee and was a terrible accident. And so it's a matter of how do we best accomplish what needs to be accomplished and yet best protect everybody's rights and persons. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on that, being mindful of the video we saw earlier today, as we look at this and making sure that we've got all the paperwork in place, are there things that we need to do as somebody is requesting, let's say, the ability to cross the railroad tracks to access their property? Are there things that we need to do to make that crossing safer before they can do it? You mentioned waiting on some aggregate. Are there issues that go along with this to improve the safety?
So that would be addressed through the lease, license, and private crossing agreement process, and not within the right of entry permit process. So we have developed a template that we have used on at least one occasion within my time here at VCTC to improve a crossing, and in that case, we were able to close 3 other private crossings in that same general area so that we would have one improved crossing that meets the needs of the landowners and also is better from a safety standpoint for both the railroad and for the adjacent neighbors. And we did that through a private crossing agreement. It did come with a number of improvements to the crossing itself. Part of what drove that particular crossing agreement was that we had a lot of damage being done to the railroad tracks. The ballast was basically all gone, and it was actually damaging the rail because there were many trucks crossing on a daily basis at that particular business site. And so we were able to work with the landowner on a new private crossing agreement. It took almost 3 years to get signed, but it's now in place, and that makes the railroad safer overall. We probably have, I can say with certainty, we have many other locations on the line that we need to do the same thing for. The one that we're working with closer to Fillmore now, it does require a new, the particular grower was in the past driving an ATV underneath the rail line through a culvert, and that's not safe or allowable under the federal regulations that govern railroads. And so we're working with them to install a new private at-grade crossing with the proper infrastructure in place to support that crossing. And so it just takes some time, and it takes some construction, and those costs are borne by the landowner who is requesting the private crossing to be put in place. That's a separate process from what a right of entry, a right of entry should be, on the grand scheme of things, when they're done, we shouldn't know they were there. If they follow the rules that are set forth in the right of entry agreement, then they're in, they're out, they clean up after themselves, and everyone is safe, and there hasn't been an impact to the property. That's kind of the intent of a right of entry. Thank you.
Commissioner Tremblay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a series of questions for Amanda and for Mr. Mattis relative to rights-of-way versus the lease license issue. So let me just, first of all, with thanks to Mr. Mattis, because I did have the occasion to communicate with his office a little bit on this, but let me just make sure that I understand the distinction. So historically, let me talk first about rights of entry. So historically, VCTC has treated rights of entry as distinct from leases and licenses pursuant to the agreement, correct?
That is correct, and even pursuant to the prior agreement, too, with Fillmore and Western.
Okay, and I neglected to include franchise agreements as well, and VCTC retains that discretion in our existing agreement with Sierra Northern, correct?
So the existing agreement with Sierra Northern is very specific as to leases and license agreements, and that is absolutely retained by VCTC. Right of entry agreements are not specifically identified as either retained or allocated to Sierra Northern, but historically VCTC has administered the right of entry agreements.
Okay, but with respect to third-party lease, license, and franchise agreements, and I'm quoting from the 2021 agreement, 2021 agreement. I haven't been around that long, believe it or not. In essence, VCTC shall retain the right to negotiate and enter into lease, license, and franchise agreements for the property, including agreements authorizing the installation, use, and maintenance of broadband, communication lines, cellular facilities, including small cell equipment, and private and public utility lines and equipment. And that VCTC will not assign those agreements to Sierra Northern. Have I captured the essence of that language correctly?
That is correct, and as the commission can appreciate, there is a order of magnitude different monetary value for those types of arrangements, that this is VCTC's property, and if there is revenue generated off of that long-term utilization of the property, that's more appropriate, both from a revenue standpoint, that VCTC retain that, but also from a management standpoint, because as the commission is aware, the right-of-way has multiple purposes. Aside from the rail purposes, it is, it is part of the master trail plan, and it also, as the commission is aware, you've had conversations about fiber optic conduit and whatnot being able to run through the right-of-way as well, too.
Okay, so to follow up on that, if I can stay with this for a minute, Mr. Chair, I certainly understand and agree with Commissioner Long's comments. I think my request would be, I have three specific, with regard to leases and licenses, and then I'll get to ROEs in a minute. But with respect to lease, licenses, and franchises, I agree with what Commissioner Long has said, and I have three specific thoughts. First thought is that I would like to see staff come back to the commission with a template or agenda report. We agendize this and we talk about this particular aspect, not rights of entry, but we talk about lease, licenses, and franchises. And you come back with a standardized form of agreement, to the extent that we can, that we will allow, or standard elements of a form of agreement with respect to these leases, licenses, and franchises. And I recognize those are three distinct types of agreements, and we may want to come back with some, but I would like to see a staff report come back on this, try to the extent that we can, a standardized arrangement, And two things that I particularly want to see in this is, what is the apportionment of liability in the event of an accident? And I'm talking specifically about insurance and indemnity provisions. And secondly, the terms of the crossing agreement. Amanda, goes to what you were saying a few minutes ago in terms of ballast repair or ballast conditions, et cetera, with trucks driving over. And it's got to be something that's fair for our farmers and fair for VCTC, and I'd like to see that come back. And I now realize, Mr. Chair, that I'm not talking about rights of entry, so hopefully I'm still on the agenda item. Mr. Mattis isn't going to cut me off at the knees.
If you're asking, if the commission is asking staff to come back with it, that's an appropriate.
Well, I certainly
discussion.
would.
You shouldn't get into the substance of it, though.
Okay, but I certainly would do that and hope that the commission would support that. Now, with respect, back onto the agenda item. My understanding is that with respect to rights of entry, that's going to fall within the definition of railway operations under the agreement for purposes of Sierra Northern's indemnification obligations. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so from an apportionment of liability standpoint, we would first look to, and under the agreement and under this June 27th draft thing, letter, we would first look to the contractor who has obtained the right of entry, and then we would look to Sierra Northern if, God forbid, there was an accident and damages flowing out of an accident on the railway, right?
That is associated with the utilization of the right of entry. That is correct.
Okay. I've got, and then secondly, with respect to, and I'm looking at page 84 of the agenda, and the June 27 draft letter, in the second bullet on page 94, it says Sierra Northern. This goes to the VCT's ability, not just on the back end to say no more right of entry for you, vendor. It's on the front end that we have the right to approve prior to Sierra Northern executing rights of entry. Is the clause in there, Mr. Mattis, construed as VCTC could reject that right of entry for any reason, or is the intent to apply a reasonableness standard relative to VCTC's discretion? In other words, does VCTC have unilateral right to say, we're not doing a right of entry?
It is not a unilateral right, because the activity of issuing rights of entry is a kind of a necessary component of the railways, but what the interest that VCTC is wanting to protect by this review is ensuring that there is documentation, ensuring that there's indemnification, and ensuring that there's appropriate insurance for the activity. So that's actually what VCTC is looking at through the right of entry. Again, keeping in mind that right of entries are short-term agreements for the specific purpose, so therefore a contractor that needs to go in there and work for a period of time.
Well, for example, on Exhibit C of the 2021 agreement, use of the property includes, in the fourth bullet on page 30, services related to the movie, film, television, commercial, or other media or entertainment purposes. That would be an example where you'd have a right of entry, correct?
Well, so.
It wouldn't be a lease or a license.
No, they would, so it wouldn't be a lease or license with VCTC under those circumstances. That's an allowable use under the existing agreement right now. So in your hypothetical, we're assuming a third party is doing this, right?
I'm assuming
Sierra
ABC Entertainment Group out of Los Angeles, I'm making up the name because I don't know, is coming in and saying, we want a right of entry, we want to effectuate a right of entry onto the railway for 3 days to shoot a commercial. There's the hypothetical. That's not a lease or a license.
Do you know,
is it?
Amanda, it is, I agree. Amanda, do they, historically, is Fillmore and Western and Sierra Northern required any kind of right of entry for that activity?
So if either Fillmore and Western or Sierra Northern were supporting the filming activity, they have not required from VCTC a right of entry. We have in the past issued rights of entry when they weren't working with, well, in the interim period between Fillmore and Western and Sierra Northern, we issued a number of rights of entry directly to film groups, particularly for things like student shoots, like USC Film School has come out and done some work on the rail line where they just need to stand on a platform. And
Understood, but
Sure.
If I can continue, Mr. Chair, I'm concerned about the insurance and indemnity provisions on here and a potential liability. But let's say you got some entertainment group that's doing a show for Netflix saying, we want access to the rail line for 3 days to shoot a scene. And, maybe it takes 3 days, maybe it takes 1 day, maybe it takes 4 days. To me, that would be a typical situation for a right-of-way agreement, correct?
For a right of entry agreement.
Sorry, for an ROE.
Right, assuming it's not Sierra Northern that's doing it, so assuming it's this third party. I agree.
Okay, so to go back to the initial question, and that is, I want to know if VCTC believed that there was a potential liability issue with allowing that, and Sierra Northern did not agree with that, would VCTC be able to, under the terms of this template agreement, say, we're not going to allow it? I'm thinking on a hypothetical where there's a disagreement between VCTC on the one hand and Sierra Northern on the other hand. And I'm thinking about what our discretion is to say, no, we're not going to allow it.
So for film in particular, that is an allowable use by Sierra Northern on the rail line, and they have the exclusive right to for filming and television activities on the rail line. So they would have a separate contract with the filming entity to undertake the film activity supported by whatever work they're doing.
But I'm confused because I thought that we said that would be typically under a right of entry. Are we saying now that's under a lease, license, or franchise?
It is not. It is a right of entry, but that has always been handled separately from these other rights of entry. And so you raise a good question in terms of the mechanics of what this right of entry agreement applies to, specifically with respect to filming activities. I'll defer to Mr. Mattis.
And let me, Commissioner, allow me to add to that, because I think your question was even more specific than that.
It was.
If you are asking whether VCTC could deny it because they had provided evidence that we thought was insufficient evidence of insurance or indemnity, the answer to that is yes.
But the other part of that question is if we thought, even if the template, even if the checklist had been satisfied, and I'll go to the insurance issue in a minute, we felt that it was not in the best interest of VCTC, could we, as a matter of law, under here, say we're not going to allow it without having Sierra Northern come back and invoke a reasonableness standard?
Well, it would be a reasonableness standard that would apply, but in my view of this, you have to, at that point, then consider the two sets of rights that are being talked about here. One is the right to do like the filming activities, which is an essential part of this agreement. That is one of the essential services that both Fillmore and Western did and Sierra Northern plans to do. And so I think you have to continue to recognize that, and then you have to recognize the other essential interest, which is the insurance indemnity issue. And so, for instance, if you took the hypothetical that VCTC was concerned about the content of what was going to be filmed, I don't think we would have the right to.
No, there's still a First Amendment.
Well, what I understand, what I'm saying is that there's a business portion to this. We, as part of the contract, we have given them the right to do filming, and as long as they're meeting the insurance and the indemnity requirements, then that is the extent of our interest with regard to the right of entry, unless the commission wants to retain greater interest. And if I may just finish one part of this, like, we had a lot of discussions back and forth about where you draw the lines on these issues, and that is ultimately a policy call of the commission in terms of where you draw the lines. And we thought that from the standpoint of having to identify which entity is actually going to approve the right of entry, that if we're going to turn that activity for these short-term incursions or utilization, if we're going to delegate that authority to Sierra Northern as an operator, that we wouldn't be involved in every other level of the decision. So we wouldn't necessarily say that that's an acceptable use of for the right of entry on this particular day and this particular use. If the commission wants to retain that authority, which we had before because we issued the right of entries before, then that would be a policy call for the commission to make. It can go either way.
Well, and despite my rather glib comment about First Amendment, I'm not talking about something that's a content-based discrimination. We don't like what you're filming. I'm talking about something where we have a belief that there is a railway safety issue, and we say no. So we could, though, so let me just follow. So as a matter of policy, we could say in this template agreement that we reserve the right to reject in our discretion, in our absolute discretion, we have the right to reject ROEs.
We could, because we're conveying that right to them through these agreements. So if we wanted to retain greater discretion on the grounds for denying rights of entry, the commission can do that.
And I would certainly be supportive of that. The second...
If I can interject just a little bit, this item has generated a lot more discussion that I would anticipate for an info consent item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think that indicates to me is that we should probably have this as a regular agenda item, as a discussion item, and pull this for future discussion, and look at it as a staff report. Mr. Erickson, any comment?
We certainly can do that. I was just going to add that the final paragraph on page 79 indicates that if this was approved, we would not charge any fees for 60 days, and we would reach out as part of our stakeholder outreach to the parties that would be affected by this change in ROEs. And based on that 60-day outreach, come back to the commission if we ran into any issues for an opportunity to, if staff determines that information gained during the public outreach process justifies modification to the proposed ROE process, staff will bring this item back to the commission for further consideration.
I'm going to go to Commissioner
But
Lopez.
we could also bring it back as a regular discussion item at the next meeting. It's at the commission's.
I'm going to go to Commissioner Lopez, too. She's waited patiently. I'll come back to Commissioner Tremblay.
No, thank you, Commissioner, or Chair McDonald. I, too, wanted to ask for a separate item, a report on the license and lease agreements, because I think there's a lot more questions and on that, so.
That's going to be my request to the commission once Commissioner Tremblay's done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly happy to defer to the chair in terms of how this comes back, or it comes back to the commission. I think I would maybe to supplement what Commissioner Lopez said. It seems to me maybe what we should do is have staff reports come back that deal both with the lease, license, and franchise issue, and with respect to the right of entry issue, rather than taking on this item today. And I was going to ask for one more thing relative to the right of entry, if I may. I would like to have some very specific discussion on the insurance limits, because of my concern that the insurance limits on the proposed insurance limits on the right of entry template are too low.
And Commissioner Tremblay, if I might, we did ask our insurance risk manager to take a look at this again. This is something that came up over the course, we worked on this for over a year, and the change I was going to read into the record before your approval was increases to those limits. So you raised an excellent question, and we can
Okay, yeah,
address
I was aware that the question, but I'd raised the issue, I was aware of the question, but I wasn't aware that we had received communications back. So
Just
with that,
since this
Mr.
morning.
Chair, maybe we could defer to you on how you want to handle this in terms
Well,
of.
I'll ask the commission if, my preference would be to pull this item completely today, bring it back as a staff report next commission meeting, and deal with it there, and that would just be strictly for item 8K. And Commissioner Long, this is your request. Is that okay with you?
Yes, please. And Chair McDonald, if I might, I just want to clarify one thing that Mr. Erickson brought up, that we wouldn't be, over the next 60 days, charging fees or issuing rights of entry. We have often short suspense and immediate needs for rights of entry, and so unless you tell me otherwise, I would anticipate to continue using the existing process and template that we use for right of entry permits for the next however long it takes to get this approved. So VCTC staff would continue to manage and oversee that and charge our existing fees until a new template is in place. And I would respectfully request that we can move quickly on this in the future, just from a workload standpoint. It's becoming
Okay,
quite
so
onerous.
the request is that we continue using the current process while we reevaluate the proposed process as a staff report for next meeting. Would that be a correct
I would just want to add, Chair McDonald, due to the, I think, complex nature and the length of discussion on this, that we may bring one item back in October, the ROE, and then perhaps the license and the separate item in November, just from a time management for me.
You're not in favor of working staff to death?
Well, we could,
I would support that, so.
so they just may come back as separate items.
Right. If the commission, you know, wants to consider it together, ultimately, you could take the report in October on the ROE and just hold off action on it until you have the report in November. I'm just concerned that the amount of work that we would do to prepare for the license and lease agreements may take a little bit more than we have between one meeting. That's my only concern.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you, Chair. And adding, just because there is going to be work put into the staff report on the lease and license agreement, if I could ask specifically if there has been an evaluation of any additional properties that should have a lease and license agreement to be included as part of that, because that was one of the questions that I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Lopez. We have actually done extensive review of that in the past. That is an item that has on several occasions come before the Santa Paula Branch Line Advisory Committee, so we can resurrect and update that. That is part of why I requested funding in this year's budget for the record of survey work to be done on the branch line, because we've been doing that work in-house as a staff, and it's just quite time-consuming to go out there with the wheel and to go through the handwritten records from the 1880s in many cases. So this is something that is this could be a full-time job for a team of 5. We're doing our best to get through it, but we can certainly include updates to that, the encroachment reporting. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move to 8L. Do you have any comments on 8L? Oh, Commissioner Tremblay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm certainly supportive of bringing and understand the workload on staff. So, for example, if you brought back the lease, license, and franchise report for October, I certainly, though, would want to have the ability to then compare that to what we're doing relative to rights of entry. I really don't want to deal with this on an ad seriatim basis. I'd like to look at it sorry, I'm lapsing. I want to do this on a holistic basis so we understand the differences between the two. We get to what Commissioner Long wants to get done, because we need to get that done for our ag community. So my thought is if you come back with a lease, license, and franchise report in October, we could then defer action on that until you come back in November on rights of entry, and then we do the whole thing together at once.
And I think the thing to keep in mind is that we have to remember the next meeting is 3 weeks away, not 4 weeks away, which really puts staff under a lot of burden, so.
It does. I'm just thinking about this in a holistic way, though, because we need to make sure we understand this. And my concern is principally from a liability standpoint.
And I would add, Commissioner Tremblay, that the franchise agreement piece is timely and time-sensitive with an upcoming broadband agreement with the County of Ventura that I anticipate bringing forward. We have been working on. So we'll do our best to get it on the calendar for October, and if not, November.
Well, and from an ag standpoint, okay.
Commissioner Judge.
You mentioned something about suspending something until you get the public feedback from this, or the stakeholder feedback. What was the stuff you were going to suspend?
Oh, just that the staff report, because of questions that were raised in April, asked for a 60-day period before the new process were to be put in place. So it would just be delayed implementation of an approved new right of entry template and process.
So for the 60 days, what kind of, would there be a revenue loss to VCTC or something like that?
More so to Sierra Northern, but we would continue to, I would anticipate that in the interim, we would continue to manage rights of entry in-house in coordination with Sierra Northern as our rail operator, using the existing template. And so that would be, we would have continued that whether it was approved today or not during that 60-day period of, and what we had intended to do was to reach out to the parties that have in the past asked for rights of entry, particularly those that request them on a regular basis, the telecom providers and the like. Rights of entry sort of come in waves. We won't have any for a few months, and then we'll have 6 in 1 month. So it really...
Or until it rains again.
Until it rains, yes. But I do know we're working on several, we've issued new licenses in the past year, and so those almost always come with a tale of a need to access the property for the site inspections and the like. So
I asked because I was concerned with hearing about all the staff time being used on this and stuff. I don't want to be losing any money while we're doing this.
thank you. I do appreciate that. And I don't mean to cry foul too much of the amount of workload. I just recognize that the commission has other priorities besides the Santa Paula branch line. And in order for us to be able to focus on those other priorities, I would just like to get this off of our plate at some point. So we can certainly try to come back in October and November with a fuller report on leases, licenses, franchise agreements, and rights of entry as a suite. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask for concurrence from the commission. As I understand it, we're going to continue using the current process that we're using. 8K will not be acted on today, and staff has heard the comments and will bring something back to us for a more robust discussion. I don't know how much more robust we can get, but this one's been pretty good. So would the commission support that action? Any objection to that? No, that will be the direction to staff then for 8K. 8L.
Okay, 8L, I appreciate the summary report on this. I want to pull this to make sure that we have the up-to-date in regards to the meeting that we had with the growers. And then also in our town hall, the time delay in regards to repairing the bridge, if you could inform the commission on that.
Sure, and before Amanda starts, I just wanted to make a few comments about that. So as you know, we did have a community meeting in Fillmore on August 15th. It was very well attended, probably over 100 people. Commissioner Long was there, along with Commissioner Crosswhite, Commissioner Brogy, Commissioner McQueen-Lejeune, and former Commissioner Mayor Andy Sobel from Santa Paula also attended. There were many of the speakers who spoke today about their concerns with the rail car storage. There were also employees of Sierra Northern and Mendocino Railway, as well as other, I think, interested parties with the railroad. I did want to point out that I felt it was a good, if belated, opportunity for information sharing by the railroad and by VCTC staff, and everyone had a chance to speak and make public comment. That was pretty substantive. I just wanted to make a few reminders in this because I think it's easy to forget that this issue with the rail cars was predicated when the bridge washed away. It was never the intention to store these cars where they are currently being stored and creating a lot of issues for this neighborhood, which I think we've heard a lot right now. That is one of the issues we're grappling with. There's also several other issues, and I have made it my goal to keep the commission as a whole informed, whether through updates or through different communication methods since this contract took effect in January of 2022, which was the same month I became executive director here. So we continue to work on it. I won't, sugarcoat it. This is challenging, and I hope that we are able to move forward in a productive manner where the railroad can operate, economic activity can occur. Ultimately, the subsidy that VCTC pays into this railroad can be reduced. I want to remind everybody that was the intention of this. It was never about VCTC making money or the amount of time and effort that myself and my staff are putting into this is frankly quite a bit more than we anticipated. It was actually supposed to make things easier. That clearly hasn't happened, but I'm hopeful that we can move forward in a way that allows that to happen. So thanks for that indulgence before Amanda starts her update.
Are you good?
Yes, and also there was a representative from Supervisor Lopez was there as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I'll start first with the bridge. We have been actively working with a consultant team led by Rail Pros to complete the design, engineering, and environmental permitting for a replacement and reconstruction of the damaged portion of the Sasby Creek Overflow Bridge. That contract was awarded in April or May, and we have just hit the ground running quite quickly with that team. All of the field work regarding hydrology and geology and mapping was completed over the summer, and in the analysis of that information, it was determined that the construction needs to take place during the driest portion of the year, which in this case is May through September. The hydrologists actually don't believe that there will be a dry season next year or the year after. The new channel that was cut during the storms in January created a really unusual sort of eddy or whirlpool that now is an estimated 30 to 40 feet deep. So there's a really significant movement of water that now needs to be addressed as the bridge is reconstructed. And as a result, we had hoped to have the bridge completed by the end of this calendar year, but because we can't control Mother Nature and the seasons, it will need to be done over the summer. So between now and then, we'll continue to work toward that. The good news is it will give us a little extra time to hire a construction management firm and the actual contractor to complete the work in a more orderly fashion rather than bringing all of that to you to the commission all at once. And it gives us a little bit more time to appropriately phase the construction project. So that's the good news. The bad news is it won't be completed until the end of next summer.
And so our community residents were told that the bridge should be complete by December so that the rail cars would be moved out of their area. So how does that affect them?
So that was always our hope and our stated goal, but we always recognized that there was a design, engineering, and permitting process that needed to take place before we could, complete the work. Again, it's unfortunate that we won't be able to complete it this year, but we're doing everything we can to get that completed as quickly as we can. As far as the rail cars, that is up to the operations of Sierra Northern.
I'll jump in here real quick on that. We are working with Sierra Northern and doing everything we can to see that those cars can be moved within the 1 year period. And we'll have more updates on that as we go forward.
Well, and thank you, and I appreciate the public coming today to speak, and I would request that our commission look at the contract to secure the buffer zone so that cars are not stored in that no matter when. It sounds like there could be a contract for a year, but who knows if they renew it. And then also there's the limitation of how many cars they can move. Based on, they said they were going to move all of them, and now, well, they can only do 30, which I understand it's business, but how do we protect both sides? We need to have business on the rail, and we need to also have what we've, for the residents, proposed. So if we could do that, that's why I'm asking.
And your second question was with regard to the meeting with the growers. I did personally meet with a number of growers, staff, and the commissioners, Long and Levere, and staff from their offices as well, along with the Farm Bureau, CoLab, Sierra Northern Railway, and Mendocino Railway on August 29th, which is included in the staff report. We talked about the concerns from the agricultural neighbors, particularly with regard to the application of pesticides and either real or perceived impacts to rail bike users. So we're working to identify some solutions and compromises that will allow the rail bike operations to continue on the line in a safe way that also addresses the concerns and needs of the growers. We've identified a number of solutions, things like improving the visibility of the rail bikes, sharing schedules in a more detailed fashion so that there's a better awareness of when the rail bikes will be passing through particular areas along the line. Also looking at the waiver that rail bike participants sign. And I do want to address too the concern about the rail bikes crossing of State Route 126. It's often perceived that the railroad has an easement across the 126, but it's actually the other way around. The railroad was there first, and VCTC, well, Southern Pacific Railway, prior to VCTC ownership, issued a license for State Route 126 to cross the railroad in 3 places. So VCTC actually owns that property. It's licensed to Caltrans for 126 operations, and all the rights to operate on that rail line were retained by Southern Pacific and thus VCTC on the rail line. And so while I understand that folks were concerned about the garbage truck that entered the crossing, I think it's also an example of how the safety protocols in place for the rail bikes actually worked, because the lead rail bike stopped when the crossing arms went down and the vehicle continued through the crossing arms. So incursions through crossings happen on railroads, and that's why there are processes and protocols in place to be protective of the rail bikes. And so while there was damage done to the crossing arm, the safety protocols that were in place were effective in preventing the bikes from entering the crossing when it wasn't clear.
Okay, Commissioner Judge.
Real quick, this might be an obscure question for some. What was the company of the trash carrier that crossed when the arms were down?
I believe it was an Athens truck.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, I just wanted to ask, the reason why I pulled this and asked Amanda to speak on this was to make sure that we have full support from our board in regards to the mediation that we're doing with Sierra Northern, also for the buffer zone for that area, and then also working with the farmers in Sierra Northern, our ag department, to ensure that there's more acknowledgement of mapping of signals on the roads so that we can really try to figure out this partnership in a better way. It's been a dramatic 8 months of consistent conversations and trying to get to this mediation. I need all of you to know how much heavy work is being done. So I wanted to make sure you understood that. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Judge, and then after that, I would really like to put info consent to rest for today. So we'll see where it takes us.
Just a real quick question. I did hear a complaint from one of the residents in that area. Something about VCTC, I may have heard it wrong, I'm not positive, but there was a allegation that VCTC is making money off that rail car storage in that area?
So in accordance with the agreement with Sierra Northern, we do receive 5% of the rail car storage revenues, 5% of gross revenues. All of that goes into the administration of the branch line and to the overall operations and maintenance of the 32-mile railroad right-of-way. So we are by no means getting rich, and
I understand it's just the way, it's just the act of doing business with a railroad, but that we didn't expect that they'd be piling up cars there because of this bridge being out.
we didn't expect that cars would be stored for such a long period of time in that location. We had expected that they would be in a less visible area between Fillmore and Piru.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
No?
Commissioner Enneagram? No? Okay.
Chair McDonald, if I might, just to try to put the...
Well, I was just going to try and wrap this up real quick here.
Sure, no.
8L is receive and file, so we don't need any action there. 8K we have pulled, there won't be any action there, and it'll come back as a regular staff report, and we still need an action on 8J. So what would be the pleasure of the commission on 8J?
That was the budget amendment item.
I'll second the motion to approve 8J.
And Commissioner Tremblay, Commissioner Tremblay actually beat you to it.
I'll
Would you
se-
be a
second.
Second? Okay. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Or, do we need a roll call vote because this is a budget issue, or?
No, you can do a voice vote.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is the most discussion I've ever had on an info consent agenda, but we made it through, so congratulations to staff. And
Well, if possible, can we have the 8L if for next week not be on the consent agenda?
Certainly.
Thank you.
it takes us to item number 9, Oxnard Harbor District update. And Managing Director, Executive Director Kristen Dekas is here, and I apologize for the prolonged discussion prior, but we got through it, so.
Chair McDonald, just before Kristen starts, I just wanted to first thank her for her patience in the annual report, and I just wanted to briefly note, again, our partnership with the Port of Hueneme. And now that you've passed the consent item, you might have noticed item 8C was a resolution to honor the Port's 10th Annual Banana Festival. So we're happy to join many other agencies in doing that. We had a booth there last year. I actually participated in it. It's a great event, and don't want to steal any more of Kristen's thunder, but thank you again for your patience, Kristen.
Of course. Good morning, members of the commission, honorable chair. It's a pleasure to be with you. I also have with me Adam Vega, if he slipped out, I'm not sure, he's right there, our community specialist to support our discussion today. I'm also here on behalf of our harbor commissioners, and just a little history on why we come out and do these quarterly updates. Some time ago, we decided, well, the port had approached the VCTC about getting a seat on the commission, and the remedy to that, or the kind of negotiating process out of that, was that I would come and deliver a CEO port update, and then we'd also have a joint meeting once a year with the commission and the Port of Harbor Commissioners. So I think with COVID and other things in place, we never had these joint meetings of recent history, so I'll work with Martin to make sure we get that back on the books for an annual meeting, to have productive discussions about partnership and transportation as one of your major economic engines here in your county on trade. So a nice message from my board. They thank you all for your leadership and your support. So some quick updates here. I call this the wow slide. Some folks might not realize this, but we've really had some exponential growth. We move over $15 billion in cargo, $50 million of cargo. We're the #1 banana port on the West Coast, and in the month of January, actually moved more import refrigerated cargo than the Port of Los Angeles, so that's just makes somewhat of a statement. We're the 4th largest container port in California, #6 on the West Coast, 6th largest automotive port in the country, and we're in the top 10% of the nation's seaports. An update on our banana trade. We actually have grown in this segment, believe it or not. We have gone from 3 billion bananas a year to 5 billion bananas a year, so we really are the king of bananas on the West Coast and certainly around the country. This is a snapshot of import commodities that come in through the port. You can see when you add up the bananas and the avocados, we actually move more in refrigerated cargo by volume than we do automobiles. So it just impresses upon you how much trade we do in refrigerated goods. But passenger vehicles is certainly an important commodity. On the export side of the house, just sort of interesting note here, one of our leading export commodities is the French fry, and we also move a lot of apples and pears and apparel and things like that through the port and export some goods from our county. This is our reach in terms of supporting domestic movement of goods. So we actually bring commodities from our port throughout the United States to these 13 states and up into Canada. So we really do support the nation through your seaport here. Interesting fact, with the governor's mandate in place, we actually are rising stars in importing electric vehicles here, so we actually moved 23% of our import cargo are electric cars. The national average is 5%, so we really are leading the way in supporting the governor's mandate for a transformation to a green economy with electric vehicles. Quick short note here, we implemented a cold treatment project working with our local ag inspector, the state of California, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to import blueberries from Peru to support regional needs of our farmers here. And it's sort of interesting what happens when a blueberry moves from Peru. It has to stay cold for 15 days. You have to keep the container plugged in for 15 days, or there could be a threat of a pest. And so if you break the cold chain in transit, historically, you would have to return that container back to Peru. You couldn't continue cold treatment on dock and plug the container in dock anywhere in the country except for in Philadelphia. And so Julia Brownlee helped effect some change there and opened up the door to do pilot projects for ports so that they could finish the cold chain if it was broken in transit, and you could plug containers in on dock. Why does this all matter? We're no longer trucking blueberries in from Philadelphia, and these are the emission reductions that we've seen by bringing blueberries from Peru to the port of Wanimi. And an interesting note also is that in a given month now, we actually may handle more blueberries during season than bananas. So this is not insignificant, and it actually has a major reduction in emission impact. Growth has been very significant at our seaport, your seaport. We are up 14% over last year, but over the last decade, we've grown 80%, and our revenue is up 130%. So we've seen record growth here at our port. And this is just another snapshot showing you where we sit in terms of being a container port. And coming from the East Coast, I'm just very happy that we hopped over Boston. So that was fun being from Massachusetts. Automotive cargo, as you know, during the pandemic, it was pretty tough to buy a car, right? Because the production of the semiconductor chip was not in good functioning order. Now it's back. The market's recalibrating. We're seeing autos come in record numbers to the seaport. We're up 31% over last year and 10% up over historic highs. So we're really seeing that market come back. It's interesting to see what the U.S. consumer will do with the cost of money being higher, spending habits changing, will cars sell? But what I've seen is that I was just at a recent visit with a processing plant, and almost every car at the processing plant before it goes to retail is already sold. So there is really high consumer demand right now for automotive cargo. Just a short note here. We have a joint use agreement with our Navy so we can use their infrastructure when they're not using it for military purposes. We have about access to 54 acres. And then we also have a customer over there, Glovis, who manufactures Hyundais and Kias. And they have about a 90-acre outlease program, so they lease 90 acres. And we both, instead of paying rent to use those assets, we pay in improvements on our local military installation. I thought you'd be interested to know collectively over the last 10 years, we have done $90 million in improvements to our local Navy base and installations through these joint use agreements. So it's really a great public-private win. And I know you served with our Navy Supervisor Gurrell and probably are familiar with this agreement and some of the value that it brings to our United States Navy. This is just a quick overview of how the Port of Wanimi is able to move all this cargo. How do we move all this stuff on a 120-acre footprint? Well, the reality is all of our private terminals are really outside the gate. So in LA and Long Beach, these big ports, they're landlord ports, and they lease terminals to their customers. Our customers all live throughout Oxnard in different locations. So when a container lands at the port, it doesn't stay there. It will go right out to Chiquita's facility where customs inspection happens. And because of this business model, we don't get congested because the cargo is so fluid outside the gate, and then it goes into distribution from all these different places. We avoid congestion. But it also, you get our customers investing in our community, and they have private terminals, so they pay property taxes, and they're major employers. So we get a big economic benefit and an operational benefit out of our business model. And what you're finding in some of the larger ports after supply chain congestion are actually trying to build inland terminals to bring their goods to avoid congestion. And because it's so gentrified in their communities, they can't do it locally. They have to push it out inland, like to Bakersfield and places like that. Just a quick reminder, we did a freight study with VCTC, and thank you, Martin, for your support. And what we learned in this is that the port really only accounts for 0.6% of all the trucking in our county. A lot of people kind of point the figure, the port trucks, but the reality is we're only 0.6% of all truck traffic, and if you look at our corridor, we represent 23% of the truck traffic on that corridor, which means 77% of the trucking is from other users. You talked a lot about a railroad, so we won't go into our railroad. Just a reminder that we also have a railroad. We move a lot of freight. It supports our local military and a lot of our customers. On the federal side, as you know, recently both the VCTC and the port have been very successful in grants. We got an $80 million, and you got a $15 million plus another $74 million coming. So I had the great privilege of going to Washington with our Secretary of Transportation, Tokes Omashak, and other port directors, and even met with Secretary Buttigieg to discuss how our ports and the grants that we've all received should leverage future federal funding. So hopefully we sent a good, profound message there, and we'll see some money come back from the feds and some additional grants for both our agencies. We're in the process of updating our strategic plan. It's been 4 years in the work. COVID got in the way. We had virtual meetings, and then when COVID left, we had open, transparent community workshops. So we're in the, I'd say, on the 1 yard line now. We're going to have one final public hearing this fall, and then we hope to adopt our strategic plan. Our pillars include economic vitality, infrastructure, environment, innovation, and community and social equity. On the economic front, you can see here, this is our county's GDP, and then you can see the GDP of trade. So we outperform our GDP in terms of trade and transportation. So we are a significant backbone of the health of the economy here in Ventura County. When we do well, the economy locally does well. And we just got a new, we're in the midst of updating a new study. So I have behind the scenes data, and it turns out the port is now supporting over 24,000 trade-related jobs. Tax revenues are also growing, and our total economic output is actually now $2.8 billion, we're learning. So once we have the data on record and the study come in, we'll update these numbers. But you can see when we do well, our local economy does very well. We also have a project labor agreement, and this has really worked well for us. We've grown 289 trades jobs, and what's been fun to watch is there's an apprenticeship program with this, and we're seeing a lot of local talent grow in marine-related construction projects, and we're getting that local talent here. So that's been really cool to blossom and grow and foster those opportunities for our trades. If you look at this is our direct contribution in terms of direct jobs, and we're almost at 3,000. We'll have the studies come out, but you can see all of your communities have residents that come to the port or one of our customers to work and play. This is because of those private terminals you have and the taxes that come with it, you can see all of your communities, and we can get you copies of these slides, but you can see there is a major tax benefit that goes into the cities around Ventura County because of your local seaport. I couldn't resist. There is construction worker Martin Erickson helping us build the port. We thank you for the $10.4 million grant. We've made over $179 million investments over the last decade in modernizing our infrastructure, and we're looking forward to investing this $80 million that we've gotten from our governor, and that's a rendering from our strategic plan to continue to modernize and grow our port. And what's really exciting about this is that it's giving us the agility and ability to do it with a zero emission footprint. So by way of example, these plugs that we use to plug in containers, we're going to run on hydrogen fuel cells. It's giving us the capacity to not only expand, but do it in a way that we have an eye for the environment, and our goal is to become the nation's first zero emission port. We did a survey throughout our community with a company called AlphaView, and the survey really reflects the demographics of your community. So if you poll so many white women of a certain age that represent your community. It's not going to take any more once it meets that demographic stat. And it does that for Latino and so on and so on. So you really reflect the demographics of your community. And what we learned in this survey is that almost 78% of the people that live here support port expansion. It grows when we to 88, 89% when we do it with an eye on the environment. Whoopsie. And we did the same study for our local Oxnard Port Hueneme Harbor District, and the numbers were very similar, very strong support for port expansion, so that was good news to us. On the environment front, in the pillar, we've invested over $70 million in environmental infrastructure. We're plugging in our refrigerated cargo ships. Thanks to the money that you're bringing to the table, we're going to be able to plug in our auto ships by 2025. We've got a lot of good projects on the books to go green, and we're very excited about that. This is a snapshot of our refrigerated cargo ship plugging in. You can see it's not a simple outlet. Yeah, it's quite a heavy lift to plug in a ship. It takes 3 men or women and quite a big plug. We are pleased to say that we were the first California port to become Green Marine certified, and we got our highest score report in recent history, scored as high as you can on community and environment. And Green Marine is a third-party auditor that comes in, so you can't just pat your own back. They come in, you have to meet performance standards to get a good report card, and you have to improve year over year to continue to get good grades. We're also measuring our air. We have reference grade, EPA reference grade monitors at the Haycox Elementary School and at our gate, and we collect data every day, every second, and we share that data with our community, and we'll be putting it on our website as well. And what we've learned is that during the winter, when the winds blow north, you may have a little inferior air in our area, but in the summertime when it's blowing off the ocean, you actually have slightly better air, but overall the air in Ventura County is good. But that doesn't mean we don't want to play our part and move forward with zero-emission projects. On community and social equity, just some updates during the pandemic. We did close to 81 food drives. Our customers brought 1.2 million pounds of produce to these events. We just did another one recently, so we're continuing this effort because there's still a need there. And we also, in terms of supporting our local community and getting jobs for the people that live here, part of our $80 million grant has $2 million to invest in a workforce pipeline. So we're excited to seed opportunities for our local workforce through this $80 million grant, both on construction and the overall job generation. We do school tours. If your community is interested, we will pay for busing to bring your kids to the port so they can have a good experience. They usually come in dragging their feet, but they leave looking like that. They've seen cranes and ships and all kinds of cool stuff. So bring your kids out. We'd love to have them. We also do public tours. We'll take your constituents on tours. We also have a global trade logistics class that we run. We do 2 semesters a year. Kids come in after school 1 day a week, and we get some of our experts to come in and train them and create trade opportunities, and then the excelling students get a paid internship with the port when they're done. And we are really getting some headway with this program. We had 66 kids apply to this semester's program, so it's really, really growing. And then the cool part of it is watching what the kids do when they come out. So a lot of them really are impacted and excited once they come in and learn about the port, and they go on pursue educations in maritime trades. And this is a list of some of the students from our local high schools that have gone on to study in maritime international trade or businesses like what we do at Port of Hueneme. On innovation, most of you, I imagine, are familiar with our FathomWorks Incubator Technology Lab. Lots of exciting things happening there. We are going to be having what we call the FathomWorks Summit on the 27th and 28th of this month. You're going to have 70 different exercises, 100 different agencies participating in testing the newest and latest and greatest in tech and maritime and Navy technology. So if you want to learn more about that, let me know, and we'll get you out to see it because it really is fascinating, the type of exercises and technology work we do. There is our beloved Carmen Ramirez at one of our events that we do at the FathomWorks Lab. This is a robotics competition that we host every year. In May, 1,400 kids come out and compete with robots, and it's almost like NASCAR. There's about 20 kids affiliated with each robot. They beat each other up. They have to do stunts, and then they go back to their pit, and they have all these labeled drawers, and they come out and they fix up the robot for the next round of competition. And I'm pleased to say from our home county, Grace Brethren did have a winning ticket and went on to nationals after succeeding in this event. So, but it's really cool, and we do that every year. If you want to come out and see it, it's in May. I'd be happy to escort you and get you out to see it. And then, as Martin stated, we do have our Banana Fest coming up on the 30th of this month. Would love to see you all come out. We can get you VIP passes. Just let me know. We'll hook you up for parking and access to the VIP opportunities at the festival. But we get about 12,000 people coming out to this event every year. And then finally, because it's Friday and we want you to all leave singing, I'm going to play for you the Port Hueneme jingle.
We're the P-O-R-T of Hueneme, committed to environment, caring for community. 'Cause we make cargo move, congestion free, helping partners grow for opportunity. We make cargo move, and we go green for a healthy life and community.
And I just want to thank Martin again, too, for his partnership and all the support and good work that we get to do together, and for your leadership as a commission really does drive home a lot of the grants and everything that we've been successful in, and just a really big thank you. You're going to help us turn this waterfront into a zero-emission port. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions for Director of the Port, Ms. Deacus? Okay, Vice Chair.
It's always great to have you come, Kristen, because the numbers, they blow my mind every year, the amount of input and output, the economic contributions to this county. It's just amazing. So keep up the good work.
Commissioner Long.
I just wanted to say thank you. It's really a statement of the vision of the Port of Hueneme and where you want to go. And you've made it very clear, and I really appreciate just really getting the local jobs here, our local businesses, the support they need to be international. It's like no one knows, but we're doing huge things because of you and your team's vision. And so I just want to say thank you.
Commissioner Grill.
Thanks, Kristen. Good to see you. In previous iterations of the strategic planning, as the port was looking at ways to expand, there's been everything raised from offshore moorage to beefing up the rail line out to like Santa Clarita and then hubbed out from there. There was expansion even further into the Navy base. Has the current strategic plan addressed expansion, and how do you feel about that moving forward?
Yes, so it does. We have an infrastructure pillar in our strategic plan where we really try and look what we want to do over the next 10 years to grow and expand the port. And we're taking two approaches to this. One is inside the gate expansion, and that involves, for instance, building a parking structure so you can stack cars and make more capacity for containerized freight. It's demolishing obsolete buildings. There's some old Navy houses on our port that are actually hazardous, so we're going to take those down and open up more room for staging. An interesting part of our grant was in partnership with Ventura Harbor, and we're going to relocate the squid operation to Ventura Harbor, and that will open real estate on the port side for more staging. So there's a lot of expansion that we can do inside our gate to handle more cargo, but the goal is to get it outside the gate, right? We make cargo move, that's our slogan. So a lot of our growth strategy is actually outside our gate, not base side, but we're working on various opportunity zone, enterprise zone projects, working closely with the county, working closely with the city of Oxnard. There is a 250-acre parcel where we've almost negotiated a purchase and sale agreement to start a CEQA process to build a port enterprise zone and support port logistics, and also bring opportunities for revenue sharing for Oxnard, and also for creating close to 4,000 jobs, and other mitigation would come with that, clearly, to support whether it's workforce development or environment with the mitigation. Even housing has come up as a proposed, but that's the goal. Grow inside the gate and grow outside the gate, given our business model. If you look at those sides, well, those private terminals. Yes.
Thank you. And I'll just make a quick comment. The Port sponsors our downtown concerts every summer. Wonderful event. If you haven't had an opportunity to be there, it's a great crowd, great time, and they're the primary sponsors. So they're out in the community doing things that, people don't recognize. So, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for addressing what's going on with the squid fishery. The city of Ventura, of course, it's an important industry. I hope everybody appreciates that this is one of the fisheries that's expected to do well despite rising ocean temperatures and ocean acidification. But I wanted just to point out, as proud as we are in this county of our berries that we grow, that raspberries are not actually berries, strawberries are not berries. Blueberries are true berries, as I once learned at a banana festival, bananas are true berries. And so we actually bring in all of our berries. And I am looking forward to a VIP pass because I definitely will be going. I learned just a couple days ago that this year the banana festival will be bigger, it will be better, and it will feature more bananas.
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments by the commission? Mr. Erickson.
Chair McDonald, just a quick note. Commissioner McQueen-Lejeune couldn't join us today, but I've spoken with her, and she does plan to attend the event, the Banana Festival, and I had spoken with her about presenting VCTC's resolution at that event.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else? No? Mrs. Deacons, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Okay, this takes us to our last item, item number 10. City of Camarillo General Plan Amendment 2019-1, Consistency Review and Determination. And this is where the Transportation Commission will take on its role as the Ventura County Airport Land Use Commission. And we will hold a public hearing regarding consistency of the City of Camarillo General Plan Amendment 2019-1 with the Ventura County Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan as our guiding document. Ventura County Airport Land Use Commission will make a determination that the proposed general plan will hopefully make a determination. I should wait till you guys decide to do that the proposed general plan amendment is consistent with the Ventura County Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan. And I'll open it up to Ms. Fagan before we open up public input.
Thank you, Chair McDonald and members of the commission. I'm here for one last mode shift. We started with railroads, then ports, and now airports. So again, for the record, my name is Amanda Fagan, and I serve as the Director of Planning and Sustainability here at VCTC. The item before you now includes Airport Land Use Commission review, public hearing, and consistency determination for the City of Camarillo General Plan Amendment 2019-1, Consistency Review and Determination. VCTC is designated as the Airport Land Use Commission for the 4 public, private, and military airports in Ventura County. 2 primary documents guide our review and determination by the Airport Land Use Commission, including the Ventura County Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan, or ACLUP, which serves as the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan for Ventura County, and the Caltrans Division of Aeronautics California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook. The State Aeronautics Act requires that a general plan amendment or adoption of a zoning ordinance within the airport influence area must be referred to the Airport Land Use Commission for a determination as to whether the proposed action is consistent with the adopted Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, and requires that county and city general plans and applicable specific plans shall be consistent with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. If the ALUC, Airport Land Use Commission, determines that a proposed action is not consistent, the local agency may overrule the decision with a 2/3 vote of its elected body. As discussed in the staff report, airports in the United States are part of a national system regulated and supported by the Federal Aviation Administration. known as the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. Airports within this system receive financial support from the FAA to operate and must maintain grant assurances that include maintaining free and fair public access and taking reasonable action to prevent incompatible land uses surrounding the airport. Airport Land Use Commission review of local plans and proposed development is part of this process to prevent incompatible land uses. The property under consideration today is located within the Camarillo Airport Influence Area, which requires an analysis of the proposed land use according to noise and safety standards. The following provides additional background and analysis of the proposed general plan amendment relative to the Ventura County Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan, or ACLUP. And as my fellow Navy friends on the commission know, it's always good to have a pronounceable acronym. The property is currently vacant. In 2016, the property was rezoned from limited manufacturing, or LM, to commercial planned development, CPD, and LM. The proposed action would return the property to limited manufacturing zoning in both the general plan and the Airport North specific plan. The general plan designation will remain research and development and does not change with the proposed action. No development plans are proposed at this time, and only the zoning is proposed to change. The property is located within the Camarillo Airport Influence Area, and airport land use compatibility with respect to noise is measured in decibels and evaluated based on modeled community noise equivalent level, or CNEL contours. The southern portion of this property is approximately a quarter of the property is located within the 65 to 70 decibel CNEL contour, with the middle portion of the property within the 60 to 65 decibel contour, and the northern portion of the property, about half of the property, being beyond the 60 decibel contour. According to the Ventura County Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan, manufacturing, light industrial, and research and development land uses are all considered acceptable within the 60 to 65 and the 65 to 70 decibel contours. The general plan land use and proposed zoning designation are thus consistent with the ACLUP from a noise perspective. From a safety standpoint, the subject property is located entirely within the traffic pattern zone, and the southern portion of the property is located within the height restriction zone, or HRZ, for Camarillo Airport. Per the ACLUP, manufacturing, light industrial, and research and development land uses are all considered conditionally acceptable within the traffic pattern zone, provided that the maximum structural coverage of the site is not more than 50%. An avigation easement, fair disclosure agreement, and covenant to be recorded by the owner and developer of the property are also recommended by the ACLUP. Structural coverage is defined as the percent of building footprint relative to the total land area, including the streets and green belts. Within the height restriction zone, future site planning would need to consider the quote-unquote imaginary surfaces surrounding the airport runway to establish a maximum height for structures to ensure safety of flight operations. Imaginary surfaces define an airport's airspace and extend outward and upward at a defined slope from the airport's runway. At the recommended ratio of 7:1, meaning 7 feet of horizontal distance, for every 7 feet of horizontal distance, the maximum structure height would be 1 foot high. The maximum structure height at the southern border of the property would be approximately 85 feet tall. At 1,500 feet of horizontal distance, the maximum structure height would be approximately 215 feet. The Airport North zoning, or the Airport North specific plan, and the LM zoning code in Camarillo all require any buildings within this property taller than 35 feet to have a conditional use permit and verified consistency with the Camarillo Airport height restriction zone. General Plan Amendment 2019-1 does not propose any development plans or structures at this time. However, future plans for the site should incorporate the traffic pattern zone and height restriction zone considerations and include maximum structural coverage and maximum building heights to ensure consistency with the A-Club. The City of Camarillo's existing zoning code for the LM zone allows no more than 50% structural coverage, so consistent with the Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan, and thus consistent with structural coverage limitations within the traffic pattern zone. Future development plans should include conditions of approval to address structural coverage limits, navigation easements, and fair disclosure agreements, and covenants to address overflights and any residual noise concerns, maximum building and structure heights, and avoiding other hazards to aviation, such as bird wildlife attractants or light and glare. But the City of Camarillo routinely applies project conditions of approval to all projects near the airport that require compliance with the Camarillo Airport Master Plan and FAA regulations to ensure their compatibility with airport operations. In addition to this review by the Airport Land Use Commission, the general plan amendment will be considered by the Camarillo Planning Commission and the Camarillo City Council prior to approval. And given that the proposed action to rezone the property to limited manufacturing meets noise and safety compatibility standards and existing protections are available within the Airport North specific plan that require compatibility with airport operations, as further described in the staff report, we do recommend that the ALUC determine that the proposed action is consistent with the A-Club. That was a really long way of saying that this is a relatively minor change to the proposed zoning of the site. It actually reverts the zoning back to its prior zoning prior to 2016. No change to the general plan land use designation, and the proposed change does meet the noise and safety standards and all of the other considerations of airport land use compatibility, at least according to my analysis of the proposed action, and I would recommend that you determine that the action is consistent with the A-Club. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Fagan? Mr. Erickson, you wanted to make I'm sorry, Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you, Chair. Since there's no proposed development at this time, when there is, if and when there is a proposed development, would it be coming back for consideration and approval as well here?
Provided that as long as the criteria that are established by the Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan are met and there's no additional proposed zoning change, I don't believe it would need to come back to the Airport Land Use Commission. I think this could have, had the Airport North specific plan itself come to the ALUC for approval in the 1990s, we wouldn't have needed to review this action at all because it was returning to that land use consistent with that original plan. But we couldn't find record that that had ever been done. So once the ALUC makes that determination of consistency, I don't believe it needs to come back again.
Thank you.
And the staff here is very good at reaching out to cities that are considering projects that would be required to come to ALUC, but they forgot to ask us about that. So they proactively reach out and say, hey, you need to come to us first. So I'm very comfortable we're doing it right. Mr. Erickson.
Chair McDonald, just a reminder, we do have a public speaker on the item.
I'm sorry, sir?
We have a public speaker on the item. The card.
Yeah, I don't know if he wanted to speak or if he just wanted to be available to answer questions if, yeah.
I should have mentioned that Dennis Hardgrave, who represents the applicant in this case, is here for any questions that you might have.
Yeah, Ms. Hardgrave, I'm sorry, I was going to introduce you, but I just thought if there were questions, you could come up, otherwise you're okay? Perfect. And I had to say to my peers on the Board of Supervisors, the Director of Airports, Keith Freitas, is a phenomenal person to work with. I am really terribly well impressed with him, and he is just absolutely always available, always open, and you guys have a gem in him, so don't let him go anywhere.
Completely agree.
Okay, with that, we will open the public hearing for any comments regarding this issue. So I will invite if anyone wishes to offer testimony on this request, now would be the time to come forward, offer your testimony and be heard. I'm not seeing a mad rush to come forward, so I will assume there are no other comments. We'll move to close the public hearing portion. I will open it up to the commissioners.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
may I move the staff recommendation?
You don't want to say anything?
Nope, I'm in support of it. It's shocking, I know, I don't want to ask
It's scary
questions
because
about
I'm
it.
surrounded by two attorneys, and so silence is golden. Yes. Okay, we have a motion to approve the recommended action. Second by Commissioner Engler. Let's do a roll call on this, just to be perfectly good on that.
Chair McDonald,
Yes.
Vice Chair Levier,
Yes.
Commissioner Enegren, Commissioner Engler,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorel,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Judge,
Yes.
Commissioner Long, Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Tremblay, Commissioner White.
Yes.
Thank you.
Chair McDonald, if I might, I just would really like to express my appreciation to the staff from the City of Camarillo Planning Department for their always excellent outreach early and often regarding airport issues. They're fantastic to work with regarding airport issues, so just wanted to express my appreciation as well.
I'm chuckling
Thank
because
you.
we forget to do that, but Camarillo makes us look bad, so that's okay.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Fagan, for being a wonderful staff person to work with. It's always a pleasure working with you. Okay, that will take us to general counsel reports. Mr. Mattis.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Agency reports, Southern California Association of Governments.
I'll make this quick. We did a lot of things go on yesterday. We moved forward the Connect SoCal 2024 report to be released in November, so look for that in November. It'll come out, and that's when it'll be able to be scrutinized at that point. We also moved forward a laundry list of reforms we'd like to see, recommendations on reforms to the RENA process to HCD, although it did go to HCD, so don't hold your breath that any of that stuff's going to come through. We also moved forward our regional council. Regional council approved updates to the PATH guidelines. PATH is, real quick, programs to accelerate transformative housing, and the RUSH program, which is a pilot program, which is the regional utilities supporting housing. Basically, we're trying to clear up all the red tape that goes into putting utilities in to get this transitional and, the new housing put in. So we're trying to get that streamlined. So that was one big thing we did. So those are three things we handled in SCAG yesterday.
Okay, Southern California Regional Rail Authority, Metrolink.
Mr. Chair, I'll report next month. Thanks.
Okay. Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo Corridor Rail Agency, LoSAN. The biggest thing that we are doing right now is we're looking at a rideshare agreement with Amtrak, so that if you have, or not Amtrak, with Southern California Regional Railroad Authority, Metrolink, so that if you need to utilize one ticket for either train, it will be able to do so. So we're looking forward to, and there have been times where I've been in LA and I've had to use both systems, and it's kind of cumbersome with two different applications to get different tickets and stuff, so this will be a huge benefit. Our ridership numbers are up, especially thanks to the X Games. We're about 3/4 of what we used to be pre-pandemic, and with the X Games, we developed a whole lot of new riders that are now liking the train, so life is pretty good for us. So that concludes that report. And then Coast Rail Coordinating Committee, there is no report. So California Association of Council of Governments. No report? And Commissioner White, usually you do something on Vanpool, but I don't have you on the list. Oh, okay, there you are. Didn't go to the last page. California Vanpool.
The last shall be first, the first shall be last. You've heard of it before. Our next meeting is going to be September 14th this month, and we have some new electric vehicles that are coming to Ventura County in early October. So we're excited about that. More next month.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will boast a little bit. I'm very proud of myself getting through a whole meeting and not confusing Commissioner White with Commissioner Johnson. So, very proud. With that, if there are no final closing comments, we will thank you all for your, I know it, but at my age, it's rough, so. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. This meeting is adjourned, and our next meeting will be 9 a.m.